Hi, I'm Michael Cook, and I'll be your host for this episode of Who's Who. Today I'm here with Emma Smith, a competitive show jumper, and why don't you tell us what equestrian is?
So equestrian is the term used for anything and everything to do with horses. So an equestrian rider would be someone who gets on the back of a horse, sits in a saddle, and does what they want to do. There's multiple types of equestrian sports. So there's rodeo, which is barrel racing, bronc riding, bull riding, cutting horses, calf roping, anything that you could think about that would be at a rodeo. That's a form of equestrian riding. There's also the English equestrian riding, which is what I do. You sit in an English saddle, and there's different sports within that community, the English community. And you can do hunters, jumpers, dressage, and eventing.
And which one of those do you mainly participate in?
I do stadium jumping.
Okay, and what is stadium jumping?
Stadium jumping is where you get a course posted on a board and you learn it about an hour and a half before you go in the arena, and it's usually made up to 12 to 15 jumps. And you memorize that course, you go out there and you have a time limit which you have to complete the course under, and if you go clean without knocking any rails, then you move on to the short course. If you knock a rail, you get 4 faults for every rail that you knock.
How hard is it to kind of learn the courses?
So when I first started riding, it was very challenging for me. I would often go out there and be like, oh, where am I going? Now I kind of just spend my first couple hours when I get there in the morning just reviewing my course, watching other people do their courses, just basically stealing with my eyes and ears.
Do you get to go out there with the horse and actually practice, or is that a big no-no?
So you don't get to practice the jumps on the day of the competition, but our competitions start Wednesday through Sunday. So Monday, Tuesday, you get the day to go in the arenas, show your horse the area. You can practice with your trainer. You can have a lesson on the show site. Anything like that you can do.
And how long have you been doing show jumping?
So I've been doing show jumping for about 14 years, but I've been riding total for 15.
Okay. What got you into riding in the first place?
So I started riding at a summer camp when I was about 6.5, and I really enjoyed it. It was just kind of like a day camp where you would go and you'd get on a horse, you'd groom a horse, you'd be led around by a trainer, and you just got to spend time with the horse, and I just loved it. I thought it was so peaceful.
So what made you choose show jumping out of all the different, equestrian sports there are?
Show jumping kind of chose me, I think, in a way that I was really unprepared for, because I first started in the hunter ring, which is based off the way you and your horse move as a team, and jumpers is more of how disciplined you are at getting through a course without knocking a fence and under the time allowed.
Okay. When you started competitive show jumping, how hard was it to kind of get into, to actually get into the sport and compete?
So it wasn't hard. I guess it was hard in the way that I was nervous to start competing, but it wasn't hard to just get into it because you just sign up and you go. You take your trainer and your team and you go compete.
Okay. Who's your trainer? Did you actually find a trainer when you started, or was it just kind of you and your family getting into it?
Yeah, so I had a trainer. I had a beginning trainer when I first started riding when I came to Texas, and then you grow and you grow out of trainers. So as you move up through the levels, you kind of just need to expand your opportunities. So I've gone to a bunch of different trainers, but currently I'm riding with Tripp O'Neill and Hanley Morrison at TKO Sport Horses.
Okay. Are you a part of because I know there's equestrian teams and things like that. Are you part of a team?
I would say that TKO Sport Horses is my team. It's not a team that is based off of how well you do as a team. Your points don't count to a team total. It's just that these are people I train with and ride with every day of the week, and we go to shows together, we travel together, we get breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. We just have a good time. And
how's the traveling? Do you go all over the country, or do you go worldwide when you do these competitions?
So for me right now, I just travel kind of locally. I travel around Texas, and I also travel in the United States. So I've been to Florida, North Carolina, and Kentucky. And this summer I'm going to Chicago.
Okay, and do you still participate in any of the other sports, or do you mainly focus on competitive show jumping?
I just do competitive show jumping.
What does it take to do competitive show jumping? What kind of horses, what kind of equipment do you need to actually get into it?
So I think the biggest piece of equipment is your horse, and without a horse, you wouldn't be able to do it. But I got my horse from a really nice trainer who kind of matched my riding style with what a horse looked like it would be able to do for me. So the horse that I have now, I got off of a video. She lived in Germany, and I imported her from Germany to Texas about 3 years ago. So I think she's a really big part of my success, but I think another piece of equipment that you have to have is determination. I think you have to be determined to put in the effort and the hours and the blood, sweat, and tears, if you may.
So, how many horses have you had?
I've had 3 total. So I got my first horse when I was around 10. My second horse I got when I was 13 or 14, and this last one I got 3 years ago.
Okay, and how long can you usually ride these horses until you have to, I guess get new ones?
So horses live until their late 20s or early 30s, but it just depends on the sport that you do. So in the English jumping community, you would typically ride your horse till they're 15 or 16 if you're at the highest level of competition. For the level I do, my horse could probably go into her late 20s.
Oh, okay. You said one of the things you need most is determination. How many hours a week do you kind of put into actually working with your horse?
I don't know about hours, but I ride 6 days a week. So
Oh, okay.
I spend most of my free time at the barn. If I'm not working or working on school, I'm at the barn with my horse.
When you're working with your horse, how much of it is actually riding and how much of it is kind of, spending time and building that kind of rapport with your horse?
So a lot of the riding that I do, usually I ride for about an hour and a half. I'll have like a lesson a couple times a week, and then I just go hack on the weekends, like just try to give her a day to just relax. We'll go out in the pasture and we'll run around and just have a good time. One thing I love to do is give her bananas. Bananas are her favorite treat, and she'll like pick up her hoof and start begging for them if I have one. So that's something I love to do.
Okay. I see. I didn't know horses ate bananas.
Yeah, I didn't either. I didn't either.
What else do you kind of feed it to keep it ready for game day, if you want to call it that?
So we feed our horses hay and grain, and then within our grain that they get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they get supplements, so they can get like bone supplements, supplements to help them sweat, supplements to help them stay energized and stuff like that. We also put them on a walker, which helps their muscles stay motivated and healthy. So that's a lot of the stuff that we do for them.
You're training about 6 days a week. How often do you go to competitions?
I go to at least a competition once a month. So I have my next competition I have is in April, and I'll be competing in Katy, Texas at the Great Southwest Equestrian Center.
Where do you train? Do you train here in Huntsville?
No, I don't train in Huntsville. So I commute to train with my trainer. He has a farm in Magnolia, Texas. So he has like a 25 stall barn that we board our horse at. And so when I'm not there, he can ride her, and then I'll commute on days after classes, and I'll go ride her for about an hour and a half, and just spend time out there.
Do you wish Sam Houston had more, I guess, kind of the utility to bring a horse up here and train?
I definitely think that would be beneficial because for me right now, driving an hour, it takes a lot of extra time out of my day, and I love being close to my horse, so if I had the opportunity to bring her to Huntsville, I would.
Is there anything Sam Houston offers for equestrian riders? Because I'm sure, us being a Texas town, there are quite a few of them here.
Yeah, so Sam Houston does have a barrel racing team, and they also have their FFA team and rodeo team. However, I decided to not become a part of the rodeo team because I wanted to focus on my equestrian jumping.
How different is the English riding that you kind of take part in with your equestrian jumping and kind of rodeo riding?
Sorry?
Like, how different is it, your English riding and kind of rodeo riding?
So English riding is very different in the aspect that the saddle is completely different. Our tack is completely different from that of Western riding. I think that the horses are also built different. A lot of the times for the Western community, they use quarter horses, which are shorter, but they do have a lot of muscle. And then for the English community, they use sport horses, which are usually imported from Germany or Europe.
And, sorry, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. With their differences, is there a big kind of leap between the communities, or do you think they kind of interact with each other quite a lot?
So I think that the communities both support one another in the aspect that we both love the bonds that we create with our horses. And I think that we both sides of these equestrian communities really appreciate how hard the sport is on the horses and the riders themselves. I think that we're all very dedicated to it. So I think that we get along when you run into someone who does a different discipline than you. I think it's easy to relate that you both have a bond with a horse.
How hard is it to like ride a horse? Because you said part of that is a lot of discipline. How much do you have to prepare yourself to go and ride?
So for being disciplined as a rider, I think it takes a lot of core strength and a lot of leg strength, and not even that, but mental determination, because you have days where you have setbacks and they get the best of you, and you're like confused as to why this would happen. You're like, am I doing something wrong? What happened? Like, what did I do wrong? So I think the days where you have those mental setbacks can kind of be challenging to overcome. But one thing I've learned recently is that you learn the most from your worst days, and that you become a better rider because of your setbacks.
What makes you most frustrated when riding? Because, those worst days are probably both things in your control and out of your control, but like what really gets to you?
I think the thing that gets me the most frustrated, and of course horses want to do the best that they can, but sometimes they get confused as to what you're asking them to do. So I think when I'm trying to tell a horse that I'm on that this is what I want them to do and they're not understanding it, so they're not doing what I asked them to do, I think that's probably the most frustrating. But I think it's also frustrating in the sense that you have to realize, like, hey, they're not trying to be bad, they just don't understand what you're asking them to do.
So how do you get them to understand?
You just take it one step at a time. You gotta kind of rewind, take a step back, just let them relax for a little bit, and then ask them to do it again. Or you could ask a friend or a trainer for help. Be like, hey, how should I go about this? That's what I do often. A lot of the times I'll just be like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. What can I do to get her to listen to me?
So what are your goals with this? Like, where do you plan to go, with this in the future?
So when I was younger, I really wanted to go to the Olympics. It was my biggest dream. And then when I got to college and I realized, like, hey, I want to have a career for myself, like I want to graduate college and I want to go on to get my master's degree, I kind of decided, like, hey, it's fun, but I don't want to put that much pressure on myself to go to the Olympics, because I'm sure it takes a lot of work and way more dedication than I could ever imagine. And I'm still young, I'm only 22, so I think that right now I just want to focus on having fun and competing and spending time with my barn mates as much as possible.
How does being a professional rider kind of look? Like, what would the days look like?
So for professionals, they get up at the crack of dawn. They feed their horses. They usually ride like 5 to 10 horses in a day, because they're not just riding their own horses, they're riding client horses as well. And then when they go to competitions, they have to trailer their horses, make arrangements for stalling and boarding and entry fees for competitions. They have to make sure that the horses are all fed. So it's very overwhelming for them. And so a lot of the times they will have grooms that will help them along with the process.
Do you ever think about becoming a professional?
I do, and I think maybe down the road in the future I would become a professional, but I don't think right now it's something that fits my time.
Okay. Thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it, and I think it's fascinating, talking about the equestrian world, especially when, I don't know much about it. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate you coming out today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
And next week on Who's Who, we're going to have the president of Greek Life coming up. You should be back to your normal host, and I really appreciate you watching. Have a good day.